He's a former homicide detective who has investigated more than 300 murders. He's the co-host of Investigation Discovery's very popular show, Reasonable Doubt. So, Chris, am I wrong? Because when I've covered single murders before, I've heard of thousands of pieces of evidence, not 113 for 4 bodies.
Yeah, so, it may seem low. They talked about having an evidence-rich crime scene. I've heard that mentioned several times. But, breaking it down to 28 pieces per victim is really not an accurate way that we should look at evidence. It could be evidence-rich in certain portions of that crime scene, and that's what investigators are saying. So, there may be small amounts in one portion of the crime scene, but there are major portions or major amounts of evidence in the other portions of the crime scene. So,
So let me ask you this. In cases that I've covered with all of the different evidence that's entered in a court of law, this particular crime is going to have multiple locations. Let's just start with the inside of the house. I mean, don't get me started. There's 2 bedrooms at least. There's the entrance point, and there's whatever was tracked, and there's all the different hair, fiber, fingerprints that anybody has left behind that needs to be excluded. That's a lot in a house like that. It's not a single-family home. There's lots of boyfriends and girlfriends and friends and former tenants, etc. Then there's the outside of the house, wherever that killer left, and whatever footprints, shoe prints, whatever trail of anything he or she may have left. Then there are all 3 floors. Then there are 6 cars, presumably. Each roommate might have had a car. Maybe Ethan had one too. Then there's the bar that they were at, the girls were at the night before. Then there's the food truck where they were as well. Then there's the frat house where Xana and Ethan were, and they still don't know about 4 hours and 45 minutes of Xana and Ethan's whereabouts. So to me, it sounds like a lot of places where a lot of things have to be looked at. And so that's why I sort of thought 113, but this isn't my expertise, it's yours.
Right. So, and I appreciate that, but you have to think about it. These investigators, I'm sure they've started to vet those locations. Maybe there are certain locations where there was not any evidence that was found. Maybe not inside of the vehicles, or maybe not. You didn't find any evidence at the bar. Not physical evidence that needed to be collected and tested. That's what I mean. So you never can tell. I would hope that they have collected as much evidence as possible, because look, 113, you want to see as much evidence as possible in a case like this. But if 113 is the number that they have, then that's what they have.
And you can't get the evidence later, right? That's also an issue. No. I do want to ask you about something. There's a report tonight that the vehicles that were towed, and not that long ago, right? Those vehicles sat outside the home within the crime scene tape for like about 2.5 weeks. But those vehicles have been towed to a city lot, and they have sat in the elements, really unguarded, potentially, with the potential for trespass. That always screams, dear Lord, that's something that can be exculpatory for, perhaps a suspect who's on trial down the road. But what do you make of vehicles that are towed away and not to a compound where police can protect them?
So unless you have evidence that proves that these vehicles were not actual portions or not used as a vehicle that was involved in the crime, or a vehicle that may have been touched by a suspect, then it's okay to have them in an open tow lot. But in a case such as this, you would want to see those vehicles put away. You want to see them locked away inside of a room. I mean, so I have 2 scenarios that kind of rings in my head when you mention about these vehicles. Now, if the families are able to go back and pick those vehicles up, that means that law enforcement has released them. They are no longer of any value to the investigation. But if they are out and the families cannot retrieve those vehicles, then that's problematic. They should be kept and placed away, because you have to come back and pick back. But you never know. You can always, just like you can always go back and talk to a suspect, you can, if you have a vehicle locked away, you can always go back and collect any evidence that may be found.
Chris Anderson, so good to have you. You know more than I do, and I needed you to sort of bring me down off of the ledge. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Ashleigh. We'll see you later.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.